Good evening, everybody. Well, it's definitely a good evening for a webinar with that kind of cold outside. So I hope everybody's safe and not too snowed in wherever you are. So yeah, delighted. This is our last webinar of the season and kind of nice timing just before our conference next Tuesday. So we'll be looking forward to seeing everybody in the flesh. But webinars are just a great way of connecting in the meantime. And just kind of picking up on something that came up in our kickoff meeting, that we just felt that a conversation around growers, collectives and producer groups, that just could be something really interesting to talk about. So we're kicking around the idea all year. And then it was like a lot of you probably know one of our network members, Barry Connolly. And Barry is someone who definitely has reached out and has travelled a lot of Ireland and met a lot of growers. But on top of this as well, as part of his organic farming masters, that Barry actually has written a thesis and done a dissertation exploring the potential for grower collectives and producer groups in Ireland. So he's spoken and interviewed a lot of growers. So we thought, who better to actually lead this discussion? And just to say, like, this is not meant to have a silver bullet. This is really about just exploring ideas and hearing from what Barry's kind of collected. So the way we run it is, I'm sure loads of people might have experience and things they'd like to share. So Barry's going to speak for about 35 minutes, has a great presentation ready for us. So if things pop up and people have comments, just stick them in the chat. And then when Barry is finished speaking, we'll pick up on the comments and then we can go through. And if somebody maybe in the group is already in a collective or has direct experience, we'd love to hear what you have to say. So Barry, thanks a million for joining us. So I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kitty. Yeah, it's the first time I've done this, so it's bear with me while I kind of get set up. Yeah, the idea for this came from, well, several things. I'll kind of take you through my experiences. I suppose I should kind of caveat before we start, like, what uh, what this is actually going to be about, what we're going to be talking about. Um, I suppose I'm not an expert on this, as Kitty kindly was giving me a lot of kudos there. I'm actually an orthodontist. I took up market gardening and decided to do this master's, but I was very interested in the concept of collaboration, and I wanted just to kind of give a snapshot of what growers out there are thinking today. I'm not an expert on the articles or regulations of EU whatever for producer organizations. I just wanted to see how we could get to a more collaborative approach to growing and see what the growers out there think themselves. So it's purely just about kind of starting a conversation, seeing how it could work, what would prevent us from getting there, and what would it look like if we did. So just a brief kind of background about me. I started market garden in 2017, randomly took over a market garden or wall garden outside Belfast. And yeah, did the usual kind of veg boxes and restaurants. Um, Ran a few courses, but unfortunately it was on a yearly lease and the owners had other plans. So great experience. The owners were great, but decided then in 2020 to go traveling. I just kind of wanted to see production from around the world. I wanted to see other types, and obviously COVID hit. Was lucky enough to be in France and ended up in the Ferme de Perche in Normandy, which was a farm that I kind of heard about. I'm sure many growers here have heard of Jean-Martin Fortier and the Market Gardener book. So this farm was set up by him, and yeah, had a great time there. Learned a lot. But while I was there and while I was traveling, I started to do the masters in organic farming, and a few I'd met Klaus Leitenberger who had done it, and heard a lot of good things. And because I had actually no training in any sort of horticulture, I grew up on a beef farm, but thought the masters would be a good idea. And while I was in France, this was kind of the inspiration for the whole thesis. I met this market gardener in Brittany. I'd actually heard of his garden before him, and the Jardin de Rocambole. He was a market gardener and turned his farm into this amazing open art installation, garden, veg production, nursery, the whole lot. But he told me about his experience of how he had his career, and essentially he was by himself and competing with other growers outside Rennes, and they decided to club together, pull their production under one umbrella, amalgamated it all, had one veg box scheme, one market stall, one farm shop, which they shared the rota. They had more time off. They were able to spend more weekends with their families. And one, interestingly, became the nursery for the other four. That was another efficiency that they found. Um, and this ran for 30 years. So he was in his 60s. He was still fit and able and standing up straight with he was a great guy. So I took that and was about to talk about moving back home, and was hearing a lot about what's going on in Ireland recently with the rise in organics and the payment and the increase in organic land. But also then looking at the stories of the veg growing industry in general, the more conventional industry, it's decreasing year on year, growers are getting out of it, supermarket price wars, all that kind of thing. And the fact that the livestock sector tends to get a lot of the focus in agri-food policy. So yeah, and also the fact that we're importing an awful lot of fruit and veg, and we're leaving us more susceptible to external shocks such as pandemics and wars and extreme weather events, which we're seeing obviously more regularly now. So I thought, look, is there a way that we can maybe see how collaboration could help with these issues and make us more kind of independent and food secure? So I did the master's over 3 years, and the third year project, I focused on this question: how could collaboration between growers affect local food availability in a new organic Ireland? This was kind of, I don't know if anyone's done a master's, it was the first time I had done one, and there was a lot of new stuff to learn, but I had to have this kind of focus. And I focused on market garden as opposed to other types of farming. But a lot of the themes from this are applicable to all: dairy, beef, the whole lot. So, and I had to focus on organic because it was organic farming masters, and because I'm a grower, it made more sense. So, what I did was I interviewed growers from around the country. I was going to do a broad range and go for more of a quantity approach, quantitative, and send in interviews or send out questionnaires. But I thought it would be better to actually get really into depth and record the interviews. And I had a great supervisor, and we kind of come up with this plan and coded all the interviews, transcribed and coded, and come up with themes. So out of the interviews, these were the questions that we had discussed. Yeah, all good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry
But
about that.
it was muted there. Someone's got fed up with me already. No, all good. So yeah, so I interviewed and recorded, and yeah, basically grouped all of the chats into these themes and defined them as this. So we looked at kind of the end, what the end would look like, what is a possible future which we could achieve with more collaboration, and how it could affect the local food economy. And then stepping back from that, going, well, okay, how would that look in real life? What would the actual scenarios be? And then rolling back again, like, so what would prevent us from getting there? And then what would be the opportunities that this could bring? So basically for the next 15, 20 minutes, I'm going to go through each one of these points, and kind of see what themes the interviewees spoke of that would lead to more collaboration, what was preventing them, what was the opportunities, and the scenarios. So just going to take you through all that now. First of all, how could collaboration affect the local food economy? And again, these themes tended to be universal across the board between the interviewees. They spoke of health. So again, quite a broad word, a broad kind of term that we use a lot of, and they spoke about it in various forms. For them, it was, having access to more food means a more, nutritious diet, and we've real issue at the moment with obesity and the cost of that on the health system. Having more nutritious food, like every public food policy pretty much across the world talks about fruit and veg, fruit and veg, fruit and veg. Yet we are competing with, the big corporates and processed food. So this is something that they said, like, it's a no-brainer to have more, and if collaboration could help that be brought about. They talked about the health of the planet in terms of, needing less uh, transport for imported food, less emissions, and then for the local environment. So the ability potentially, what some spoke of was actually having, a dairy farm, a beef farm, and a veg farm, and potentially swapping nutrients, or recycling nutrients. That was obviously better for the environment, and in the local area. And this was something that many people spoke of, was actually, from their client base, customers telling them that they actually had more pride and were more connected to the food when they knew the producer. Obviously, that's almost a cliche now, but it really does, something that we need to push, I think, as growers, is that people don't want to waste the food when they know who grew it. They when it's grown in the area, they don't want to, just chuck it, or are willing to invest more in it and actually have pride in their area and their farmers. So that was something that they spoke of as a real benefit. Obviously, the food security element, you know, we're extremely dependent on our fruit and veg imports, but we have huge capacity to be way more food secure. This this photo always stuck with me. This was the end of the first year. This was December, Christmas, just before going into Tesco, and I properly grown veg and was 19p for a kilo of carrots at Christmas. Kind of just still shocks me. So yeah, so having more food security, so we're not dependent on this. Economically, several of them spoke of, more growers, more grower groups, more collectives means more employment. This will attract more people to rural communities. Also, by providing more local food, you have the possibility to have people there who want to be there because of that. Um, these 3 points on small acreages, growing part-time, and women, there was some very, very interesting chats. And I interviewed, it was actually pretty much 50-50 in terms of male and female. And, the part-time grower, the person who maybe can't afford actually just to be a full-time grower, but would like to spend 3 or 4 days a week, or maybe 2 or 3, grow 30, 40, 50 kilos of salad here and there, shifted through a growers group. That would have been a huge potential for some of them. Also, some of the female growers spoke of the fact that, they're having to, usually it is burdened with the childcare. So if they could have, a couple of days a week to go and grow, and not having to run the whole thing themselves, um, that was something that they saw as a huge, huge benefit, which was very interesting. The social aspects, many spoke of, creating this kind of the farm as a hub for the community, and the collective of farms being a kind of extension of that. I thought this quote was very interesting. One said that more collective growers is a statement of the power and importance of collective action. Now, later in the thesis, and actually towards the end of this talk, I talk a lot about, or I mention the idea of collective action. And when you really get into collective action and collective thinking, it's a challenge to the individualistic way of seeing the world, which, I think is the core of a lot of the problems we have today. So it was very, very interesting to see how they saw that, and how even maybe some of them had, security in terms of a house and land, but just really missed the social aspect and the growing together and how important that was. So I thought that was something very, very interesting. So then moving on to what it would actually look like. So these are the kind of scenarios, and these are the real life potential kind of situations we could create for collaboration. Some spoke of a pilot farm, growers groups that supply various different forms of the public, informal groups, and then don't collaborate. So I'm gonna go through these one by one here. Um, Creating the pilot farm. One person in particular I interviewed had quite a lot of experience in general in growing, and also in producing collectively in various parts of the world. And they said this is something that they'd seen before, maybe not on a grand scale. And a friend of mine, talked historically, like there were model towns, there was model farms that were set up to kind of show, well, look, how can this work? Let's give some public money into this. And as someone said, like the space and freedom to fail and learn and progress, and therefore show other producers how collective farming can work. I thought that was a really great quote, just to kind of say, well, look, how can we use public funding well? How can we give people the space to say, well, does this work, and what can we learn from it? The universal basic income trial, I think, is a really good example. Just giving it out 2 years, see what happens. Um, this is something that they thought, and you could mix in other types, your poultry, your apiculture, um, whatever you want into that system. So then there's the obvious one of, okay, we create a group of growers, we create a producer group, whatever way we want to define it, and that could just supply conventional retailers. And this is actually quite low hanging fruit, I think, in that there's people already doing this. Just a few growers come together and they sell salads to SuperValu. Now they might still have their independence by going to the market, but they can plan and have a few beds a week that they know they're going to ship salad, and that's just a steady income that they know, okay, that's guaranteed, that's my bread and butter there. Something that would be a real stepping stone to maybe more collaboration. When I get into some of the barriers to collaboration, that control aspect was a big part of it for some. So being able to let a little bit of the control go, but also keeping some of it for yourself, and then just have that independence, but dipping into it. And SuperValu, in fairness to them, are very good. Some of the growers I interviewed, that's their main route to market. And some spoke of the fact this could be just a county-based thing, a region, whatever you want. So that was one potential scenario. Others then spoke of a growers group that doesn't go to the conventional system and kind of stays to the more alternative channels. One interviewee had quite a lot of experience, or saw this in Europe, the multi-farm CSA model. So basically a veg box scheme that instead of it being one farm, it's 4 farms. Similar to the French, the Brittany system that I mentioned at the start. Uh, you know, I don't know if people have grown in veg boxes or have them themselves. Usually there's 8 to 12 items every week. You just divide that up by 3 or 4 growers, so you're able to specialize more, you're more efficient, you can then rotate the crops around the farm, and every year you get to change and grow something different, but you're really focused in on those few crops. And then financially, you just divide the box value. That was something that they had seen, and apparently was quite successful in certain parts of Germany and France. Others spoke of feeding into a food hub. There was an example of the Colombian, certain parts of Colombia where there are municipal kind of districts or whatever, or departments where they actually have created public market spaces, and the running of that is taken over by the council, and there's stalls that you just come along and use. Also on a food hub system as well. I thought that was very, very interesting, and also the possibility to supply public institutions, having a growers group that will supply schools, hospitals, prisons, on whatever basis you could, similar maybe to the first, that you still have some dependence, but you're supplying your root veg to the schools or whatever it is. And again, you could have all 3 in there. You could have a bit of it all. So yeah, again, just to kind of summarize a little bit, these are all feedback from the interview. This isn't me coming up with plans. I did do a literature review, but it was very interesting that some of the stuff in the literature, a lot of it linked into what was happening in real life, and what the interviewees spoke of. Creating then an informal growers group, and these already exist across the country. There's several of them. I met one in Mayo. There's a bunch of growers over there. It's a fantastic little group, totally informal, nothing serious. They don't have any sort of formal recognition. They're not registered for companies or anything like that. It's just to meet up, chat. They have a little rota every few weeks. They go on to the other people's farm. They have a cup of tea. They're in and out in an hour and a half. And pretty much they walk the fields together. So they just go around and they say, "Look here, mate. What do you think that is?" Or I can't figure out what's happening to that crop, or whatever it is. And then some of them do buy and sell produce and machinery between them. There's gluts of courgette, and someone else has a better market that can suit them. If someone doesn't need that seeder anymore, they shift the seeder to them. Um, and for all of them, it was just that social outlet, that having people who understand you and people who get what it is to grow, and just having that little bit of, okay, reassurance that it's all going to be okay. So yeah, that was an interesting group over there. And this person, I really enjoyed this chat. Um, this grower talked about what about not collaborating and being in competition as a good thing, which kind of surprised me, as you can imagine. And from their experience, they actually had a lot of experience in producer groups and sharing machinery groups and things like that. And they're in a part of the country where there are, probably the most growers in on the island. And they said that when a new grower came, their revenue went up. Initially, they thought, well, they're going to take my customers, but it didn't, and it actually grew their market. And then another grower came, and the same thing happened, and they realized they were growing new customers. And what it did is, as they say here, they give it an edge to their production because they'd say, well, oh, he's actually also putting his leeks into super value, and there's mine, and God, they're good. His are top notch. I'm gonna mine next year. I'm gonna be even better. So it actually made them a better grower. Maybe this is something we can chat about after, but it just kind of showed that actually just it's not this kind of maybe idealistic utopia that maybe I'm imagining, but having competition is good, or maybe elements of it. So that was another option. Um, then moving on to the barriers to collaboration. Now, there's quite a few. I'll go through them one by one, but I'm not going to spend tons of time on them. Again, there's a thesis just in these alone, but I think they're quite important because they kind of show, well, look, there are tons of benefits to collaboration, and it can really have a big impact. There's not many examples of it happening at the moment, but if we wanted more, how do we get there, and what do we need to overcome to get there? So these were the main themes out of all the interviews. So yeah, the first one I think is probably an obvious one. If you're a grower, you have your standards, you have your quality that you like to set, and your customers are used to. You're then in a growers group with three other growers. Maybe their bunches of carrots aren't as nice as yours. Maybe they don't take as care with the machines as you do. Maybe they're late. Maybe they're whatever it is. That was a big fear for a lot of people. And then linking on from that, the relationships themselves. Um, Growers, and obviously I'm generalizing here, but we tend to be quite um, determined people. Some very strong personalities out there, and I think you have to be to do it as a job. It's a great job, but to then take away that control that you have, and a lot of people get into market gardening to have more control of their food system, of their food supply. So if you're thinking, well, okay, I'm now giving away some of that, that's a big step for a lot of people, and it might not go well. But for both of these, I think everyone who'd mentioned this has said, look, there's nothing that couldn't be sorted out with some really good, clear dialogue before you get into it. And really getting into actually the values of a person and their beliefs, because certain people said, they couldn't work with people who just didn't have the same values as them, even if they were the best grower in the world. So those are things that, just dialogue essentially. Um, then others spoke of the lack of funding to run a group. Um, Again, there is funding out there for producer organizations on a bigger level. Maybe there's some people here listening who know more about this than I do, but on a small scale, there isn't a lot at the moment. And those who have experience or who would like to do it say that for them, actually, one of the big issues is that they're having to do it themselves as growers, and they're already totally stretched in terms of time and energy to run a producer group is just a step too far, and it's actually a big stumbling block for them. So having some sort of funding to run the admin side would be a big advantage. I know of people who work in things like Talib Bio, and they said that was a big game changer for them, having a bit of funding, just a little bit to pay someone just to do the emails, the admin, to make the thing really run more efficiently. So that was something that could be discussed. The agricultural policy itself, I spoke of, that again mentioned at the start, there's a big push for exporting of our livestock sector. But some mention as well that there are commendable payments coming through to organics at the moment. So yeah, that was another one. This was quite a big topic. Um, Again, maybe not fair to judge the whole of Irish food culture, but many growers had mentioned, that in their area they felt like they'd hit the maximum amount of customers they could reach. That they felt people, just weren't that interested, or they didn't have the income, or compared to the market culture of France or Italy or Spain. Others spoke of the fact that we have such a processed food based um, diet at the moment. We're heavily influenced by America. We're kind of weirdly stuck in between these two cultures, and that real desire for fresh fruit and veg just wasn't there. Many spoke of their experiences pre and post COVID. The huge demand when things were really tricky in 2020 and 21, and then how that's kind of dropped off. So having more of a demand from population was something they spoke of. And then linked into that was education. So, how do we expect people to be interested in fresh fruit and veg when they don't really know about it or know what to do with it? Some interviewees spoke of the Nordic countries, Norway. This was something I really went into in the thesis. I thought it was fascinating. I think never mind collaboration or growing collectively. I think this is a no-brainer in the future in Ireland, is to make food and health a subject, a core subject in itself, on the same level um, as the core subjects, maths, English, whatever. And in the Nordic countries, they have it from age 5 to 17 now. I actually put it in the appendices, some of the actual criteria you need to meet in the curriculum, and I was going to read one or two. This thought was fascinating. This is what 10-year-olds are being taught to discuss how diet may contribute to good health and use digital resources to assess their own diet, and critically assess information about food production, and discuss how consumer power can impact local and global food production. Like, I don't know, I don't have kids, but I don't know if the kids right there are learning that at school at the moment. So, that's something that's just would be a huge benefit to drive the demand, and for them, creating a new generation who can really appreciate food. And then on top of that, you're also making horticulture an option for people, or just putting it out there, something that people could consider as a career choice. Um, so that was an interesting one. The population distribution of Ireland. Several spoke of maybe just their area, being very very rural. How do they meet that demand when there's just it's so sparsely populated? And then others spoke of the access to land and planning permission. Now, I think this is this is in itself a whole other webinar. But yeah, to actually have access to land to grow. I know of a few growers who are in the process of it. I know of a few who've already started. Um, this is mostly in France. Here, I know of one or two people. And yeah, of the interviewees, it was very, very interesting also living on the land. Um, you Practically all of them had to live in some temporary dwelling, some still do. And almost all had either inherited or bought the land, or bought it a long time ago. So for new growers, yeah, this is probably a whole other webinar. And yeah, moving on to more positive things now, the opportunities that collaboration could bring. So yeah, overarching themes going into production. Some spoke of the fact that uh, a no-brainer of being able to share fixed capital costs, sharing a transport vehicle, seed compost, marketing, whatever it is. Labor was an interesting one in that if you have other farms, other types of industry, you could share the labor and keep that person. When I had the market garden, I can only employ someone for 6 months the first year and 8 the next. Then you're hoping they're going to find another job for 4 months over the winter and come back again. Now, I know there's other market gardens in the country who do employ all year round, and it's fantastic. I was only on half an acre, but if you have a different type of industry, maybe there's a beef or dairy farm or something that you can keep that labor there. And yeah, the obvious ones of economies of scale, through sharing that. As I said before, the degree of specialization, and then several spoke of the seed saving potential in a group of growers. if you had take that French example of 5 growers, imagine each of them are saving 2 seed crops a year, maybe even 1 seed crop a year. Keep something simple, you rotate it round, you could sell it, you could then use it, you're increasing the adaptability to the region. So another massive benefit that could come about. Um, I think, yeah, almost everyone spoke of the social benefits. The fact that that encouragement you get from being around people who understand what you're doing. you know, uh, I don't know how many growers are on here tonight, but like it's an amazing job, but it can be very lonely, and you can feel like this is just impossible. And even with your partners or your brothers or sisters or your kids or whatever, no one really understands like another grower, and you can properly geek out over it. You can properly get like, yeah, okay, that's really helpful, or they've learned a new trick or whatever it is. So yeah, having that bunch of growers around you just to be there, um, would be a fantastic benefit. One farm in particular that I interviewed is turning in their business into a social enterprise. So they still own the buildings and the land, but they've given the actual business over to the community. So it's community ran, and it's huge potential there. They have um, dinners they have together, they harvest together, they share the costs, it's the benefits. It's a brilliant model. This is something I actually didn't originally think of, and a few growers spoke of this, and I did have this in France, in Normandy, where you actually can afford expertise because you're sharing the cost. So this is Niels Corfu. I don't know if anyone's done any of his courses. I did one maybe 5 years ago, and you know, if you have 5 or 6 growers together, you get someone like Niels over to talk about the soil, talk about how do you improve it. In Normandy, we actually had there was maybe 50 growers in our region, and we employed a market garden expert. And every week during the growing season, we got this kind of newsletter or like a 2 or 3 page of like, okay, carrot root fly is not here yet, you should be grand, or there's something coming in, watch it, put your whatever insect nets on, and hold off on planting the. It's obvious enough stuff, but if someone's just doing it there for you and kind of keeping you on your toes, they were able to do that because they share the costs. So that was something very, very interesting. And then the political side to it. So, the fact that you're actually working together, you're taken more seriously. If you're dealing with the supermarkets, you're able to potentially lobby more. You're just the basic strength in numbers. Several people are that I interviewed are in some of these organizations or would like to be in them, and they say, it's something that's really important to them. And when you actually see change come about through that collective action, it was really important to them. Yeah, as I said, that's only a section of the research. I kind of find honed in on these few points because this is the stuff that could actually be done to bring about more collaboration and more collective growing. The funding to have small scale producer groups uh, is an easy one. Again, maybe there's someone out there who knows more up to date about this. Maybe it's on the cards. Having the demand from an educated population who are really into food and health by making it a core subject seemed like a really interesting point. Um, Creating an Irish version of Terre de Liens. Now, again, this is potentially off topic, but Terre de Liens means link with the earth, and it's a French organization that basically helps match those with land who don't know what to do with it with those who are looking for land. And there's all sorts of chats happening at the moment in Ireland. If anyone's in those conversations, I'm in some of them. But that would really allow access for new entrants and those with land to do good with it. Yeah, the public stalls like the Colombian system, food distribution hubs at a regional and county level. Again, these are just ideas that could help allow the collective growers groups to provide for their community. And then I think dialogue was what it all kind of came down to, really. Um, Part of the thesis kind of could have become a philosophy PhD when I got into dualism versus animism and all these kind of sorts of thinking of collective mindset versus individualistic mindset. And if we actually want to work in a collective, if we want to be part of more of a collective uh, group of growers or whatever it is in your community, like this was the key. This was what everyone kind of spoke about. How do we get there? How do we get away from this kind of individualistic mindset? And you see it in other parts of the world. So yeah, I'm not going into too much detail there. But that was just the end of the overview of what came back. And yeah, I use this futures thinking and behavior change model as like, well, how do we get there? And yeah, if anyone's interested, the thesis, I'm happy to share it. It's relatively long, but it's not too difficult to read. Um, it touches on pretty much most of the things there. The literature review talks more in depth about the producer organizations and collectives across the world, and then some of the more interesting points about kind of values and dialogue and how do we kind of become more open and collective in what we do. And yeah, that's it. 34 minutes, not bad. Thank you very much.